Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. I've never really talked much about what my channel is supposed to be about. More or less, it's a combination of a little bit of a variety channel, some media critique, news and politics. Occasionally I'll get into some personal stories or narratives or lessons that I've learned that I think might be helpful to you. I'd like to introduce a bit of a longer project that is a result of me combing through a lot of different media. Recently, I have noticed that there seems to be some lanes opening up for people to connect in ways that I hadn't anticipated, since things are so divided on partisan lines. However, if there was ever a time where horseshoe theory may have some salience, it might be now. I'll get you into some videos that cover some conversations that I think are really important right now. The first one is a conversation with Dave Smith, who's a libertarian, on breaking points. He kind of talks about how he's changed his mind on the people that are in charge right now, who he once supported. He's sort of reaching across the aisle. It sounds like he was a bit sad that some people across the aisle left for a little while in the anti-war space because Obama was in charge. Where I find common ground right now is people's anti-war stance. There's multiple going on right now. Some other videos are going to get into where I find hope, the hunger for authenticity, and a different kind of politics which we have, and people that are closer to where I line up on the spectrum. I'm not cleanly fitting in any particular box. I think most of us are like that. We're complex people. People like Graham Plattner, who is shaking up things in the establishment, Zohran Mamdani, to name a couple, who managed to win over people from, for the lack of better words, like both sides of the aisle. And like, really, I don't really think there's as much of a divide as we seem to think there is. The media certainly seems to want us to. The people that are in power certainly seem to want us to. And that's another area that I want to get into in some of the clips that I'm going to share with you guys. Again, this is a media critique as well as exposing you guys to other creators that I think are pretty good independent voices and that cover things from an independent lens that's outside of the establishment narratives. I do have some critiques of the establishment. I do have some critiques of people that are funded by dark money that are coming up. I want to tie in some people that I find inspirational in, as an understanding of what we need to do going forward is figure out how we can come together on some things. I just want to share these things with you guys. It's a long one, so buckle in. If I can give you guys chapters, I will. That might be a little bit beyond my scope and ability at the moment as an editor for content. I'm Born Free. I go by Born Free 44 on some of my socials. On TikTok, I have an alternate channel there. I'm Born Free or Die Fighting on YouTube. Born Free 44 on my Patreon page. If you want to support me and follow my work, I do this on my free time. I'm not really expecting anything. It's appreciated if you can. It's just a sign of support if you do. I do offer a lot of stuff for free. Occasionally I'll give some exclusive videos. My content's ad-free on my Patreon page. There's a couple of different subscription options available for you guys. I hope you enjoy this little thing that I put together. I think it's important, especially to understand where we are right now. Some people are having a hard time getting their head around what we should call what's happening in our government right now. A lot of people are just not ready to accept it. I am hearing more and more voices calling it out. I want to get through this with as minimal suffering as possible for people. There are a lot of alarming things happening. Stay tuned. Please follow, like, share, subscribe, hit all the buttons, do all the things. Thanks.
I do think that, look, it is true. There's always been this criticism of Donald Trump supporters that they're like a cult-like following.
Yeah.
There's no question that there is an element of that with a lot. And then the comment about shooting people on Fifth Avenue, like, yeah, okay. They're essentially, we're running that experiment right now and finding out who will stay by him no matter what. But I do have to say, just my opinion, and maybe I'm not the best guy to sell this message because I did support Donald Trump and vote for him, and I did come on your show before all the others and apologize for that. Even though that is very trendy these days. I was 7 or 8 months ahead of most people on that, but whatever. I can't really brag. I voted for Donald Trump, and now I'm saying that was a mistake.
Sure.
But I'm just saying, Barack Obama ran on peace. He ran on ending the wars. He ran on closing Guantanamo Bay. He ran on restoring habeas corpus. He ran on a million things that he just never did. And not only didn't do them, but expanded the worst of the Bush policies, and himself was even worse than George W. Bush. If you look up the civil war that he kicked off in Syria, the toppling of Gaddafi in Libya, backing the Saudis in Yemen, Barack Obama killed like a couple million people, just slaughtered innocent people, destroyed whole countries, and by the way, surged in Afghanistan and then pulled out of Iraq and then reinvaded the country of Iraq. And how many of the most popular pro-Obama people turned on him in the middle of his presidency, said he ought to be impeached and removed? He's maybe even the Antichrist. This guy, not that many, you know? And with Donald Trump, it's been a tsunami. So look, I don't think the move, like I mourned the death of the anti-war left for 15 years. I was the anti-war left before I got converted to being a libertarian. It broke my heart that they all disappeared under Obama. And when they all came charging back about Gaza, I was like, let's go. They're back. Like, I don't think we need to sit here and get into these arguments of, but you supported Biden and therefore the genocide is all your responsibility or something like that. Like, look, man, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris deserve to lose 1,000 times. They deserve to lose 1,000 deaths and be launched to the moon and never allowed back on Earth for funding the genocide in Gaza for their whole last year of their administration. Just totally unforgivable. And Donald Trump deserves the same for all of this. So I think at this point, we're in a really dangerous situation. This war could really spin out of control very easily. And we've never really been in a situation before where there's a war launched and the propaganda apparatus is non-existent. They cannot sell the American people for this. This is why Mark Levin is openly talking about how we got to bring tech censorship back.
I know. Yeah.
These guys know they got to shut all of us down. So instead of us sitting here quibbling with each other over who in a forced binary decided this candidate versus that candidate and for what reasons, I think we should just all be opposing this as loud as possible. And just to say, you know, because people will say sometimes to me, they'll be like, oh, so you criticize all the presidents. Who was your favorite president? You don't have one who you give a pass to. And it's like, yeah, they're all war criminals. They're all genocidal maniacs. Why should we set the standards so low? They all get an F. The grade from George W. Bush to Obama to Biden to Trump, every single one of them gets an F. It's just terrible. And I think you do see maybe, yes, there are a percentage of people who will support Trump no matter what, but I think less so than any other president of my lifetime.
I hope so. I hope you're right, that we at least see that whenever it comes to war. Dave, as always, we appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you very much. I'll see you at our next smoke session. I
got some good stuff. I got some good stuff for us. Don't you worry about that.
I think that's what the kids are saying.
No, I really, can I just say, I know I say this every time I'm on, but I really do admire both of you guys so much. This show is phenomenal. I've been watching you guys since Rising, and I will say, I think this war in Iran, your coverage, I think this has been the best period of your show the entire time I've been watching.
I think we feel the same way about that as you do about, you know, being vindicated in your anti-war analysis of like, we would take a lower chart ranking and less YouTube revenue for the world to be more peaceful. But you don't get to pick that. So you take your consolation prize, which is 2 million subscribers and 15 on YouTube is really great. And look, it's really important to get the truth out to as many people as we can. So thank you guys. Well, thank you. It's one of the things that does give me hope is even with the overwhelming propaganda, you know, on the genocide in Gaza, on, you know, pushing for war in Iran and all of that, that people are seeing the truth. Now, do we have a democracy worth its salt where that matters too much? That's another question, but that's something to work towards in the future. Dave, good to see you. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
The reason that it doesn't seem focus grouped and the reason that my messaging is because it isn't. Like, I write my own speeches. Like, I give my own opinions when people ask me them. Like how fucking broken are we?
Oh, baby.
I know. So there's that. The other part, though, is that I'm just saying the things out loud that I've heard from my neighbors and my friends and my community members for years.
Right.
I mean, it's something I've gone all over Maine for the past 9 months now. We've talked to like tens of thousands of Mainers. I hold multiple public events a week. It's all open to the public. We don't screen questions. We don't screen people. Like anybody can come. And so I've been talking to everybody, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, the whole nine yards, people that just don't care about politics, the whole nine yards. And if you ask any Mainer, do you think you live in a political and economic system that has your best interest at heart? Nobody says yes.
And by the way, I mean, you transfer that to any state in the union, I think. I mean,
yeah.
I think that's absolutely the undercurrent. I mean, Graham, I have to tell you, look, I talk to people in politics all the time, and I've done it for many years. This might be the longest conversation I've had without a platitude with a politician. I like, it sounds ridiculous, but I cannot tell you how canned, how often you hear. The Democrats just have to get back to those issues of affordability. We've got to get back to what people talk about around the kitchen table. And I'm like, I don't think people actually talk around the kitchen. I think they're eating in their cars. Like,
that's right.
But that's what I'm saying. I think there is a refreshing openness and honesty to approaching something this way. And I cannot wait to see how long it takes for you to be consumed by that system.
Honestly, man, like that is, it's
you worry about that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course. And I don't I don't worry about. Look, I'll just say, like, I love Bernie Sanders, and I've developed a very nice relationship with Senator Sanders, and it is very clear to me that Senator Sanders has maintained his integrity because he believes.
Yeah,
and I believe in the same thing Bernie believes. I think we have a very, very similar sort of foundational politics, which is like we care about people. For like it's a politics of humanity, and it's a real politics. It's not a politics of like trying to like get into power for your sake. It's because it's only in these like I just have a theory of power of these political institutions that exist around us. If we want to change things, we're gonna have to like use them in some way. I would love if we could just do something else, but like right now it doesn't seem like that's possible. Now I do think that. Because like I'm not really a reform candidate. I don't. I very much like Bernie believe in the need to have a political revolution in this country. We need to restructure things. We need systemic changes. Like it's not a.
But it's not nihilistic. I don't find what you talk about as nihilistic. I think, and it's something that I think the Democratic Party has really struggled with, which is I think they're still relying on the idea that the New Deal was a good idea, and that was in the 30s, and that was the Democrats. And so let's just figure out ways to continue picking around that. Let's do a tax subsidy here. But they don't think broadly and systemically in the way that I think is necessary. And maybe that's what you're thinking of.
Well, like if I'm any kind of Democrat, I am a New Deal Democrat.
Right.
But like the New Deal wasn't picking around the edges.
Exactly.
Like Social Security wasn't a tax credit. It wasn't a block grant. It wasn't a marginal amendment to an existing policy. Francis Perkins and FDR and a bunch of labor unions invented Social Security out of whole cloth. And the CCC, the WPA, the TVA, the Rural Electrification Administration, all of these things.
And listen, some of it worked and some of it didn't, but there was a theory behind what they were accomplishing.
And there was also the political will, which
yes.
I mean, and FDR had a theory of power. I mean, for instance, mid-1930s, Supreme Court is about to say that all the New Deal programs are unconstitutional. FDR,
yes,
against the wishes of his own party,
yes,
says that he's going to pack the court. Suddenly, very quickly, all those unconstitutional New Deal programs became constitutional overnight. Nobody changed the language. Nobody it's almost as though political power goes a little bit further than just the words on the page. It's almost as though that political power is, in fact, its own unique thing that needs to be at times wielded creatively. And, and if that hadn't happened, then this country doesn't get dragged out of the Depression. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have set the stage to win the war.
Do you see parallels with this moment? One of the things that I think about sometimes, to be fair to, the system, Roosevelt did have large margins, at that time because Hoover would, the Republicans had fucked up at that point so grandly that there were margins there that could be worked within. But even when Democrats have margins, I can recall when they've had the Senate and the House and they had a supermajority for a little while, they still did that thing that you're talking about, which is let's not push this too far. Let's make sure that this program for healthcare isn't healthcare for everybody because that's going to scare people. Let's just give a subsidy to insurance companies so that they will just bring more people into this broken system that we have.
That's it. And which is exactly what has happened. And it didn't fix anything because the problem isn't marginal. The problem is systemic. And systemic, this is the reason we know it's systemic, by the way, is because it's happening everywhere. It's not like one state has a problem with housing. It's not like one state has a problem with healthcare. It's not like one state has a problem with affordability. It's the entire country. And so, which is very clear to me that this is a obvious systemic problem. But okay, because we Roosevelted a little bit, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do one more.
How could we not Roosevelt? We had to Roosevelt.
In 1928, Roosevelt writes that the problem with the Democratic Party today is it has no constructive policy and vision of the future, and that if you ask the average American what the Democratic Party believed in, nobody would be able to tell you, and that the entire theory is that we're going to wait for the Republicans to screw it up so much that we'll just magically get power again. He said that in 1928.
Wow.
And
wow.
And when
and at that time was Chuck Schumer the leader of the Senate? I'm just curious.
Possibly. It's
same shit, man.
But here's the thing, though. And this is why I'm not remotely hopeless. Roosevelt writes that in 28.
Mm-hmm.
By 1933, he is president, and the nation is fully engaged in the project of fixing itself out of the Depression.
That's right.
Like the first 100 days of his administration, right? Like there's the whole joke about the alphabet agencies because they just invent 10 new agencies just into existence.
And created markets where they didn't exist before, and created safeguards so that bank runs didn't exist, and created financing for housing, which didn't exist. All of those things. Did it in a racist way, but still did it.
Well, but the thing is, those New Deal programs for all in the society that they built really in the 50s and 60s, which had a myriad of faults. Faults of racism, faults of leaving out immense amounts of the nation. However, what we have to understand is we can look to that and say, we can do that in a not bad way.
That's right. It's a blueprint.
Of blue-collar, high school educated voters we will lose is smaller than people think, because the people who go for Trump's appeal, particularly immigration and, the them versus us, they're already Republicans. Here's an interesting fact. High school educated males, Democrats are pro-immigration reform, Republicans are anti-immigration reform. Both high school educated in the same places. So in other words, the kind of appeal that Trump has brought out above the table, Republicans have always been using below the table, and it's already won a large percentage of those people over. On the other hand, Trump is so new that this is the second point, for every blue-collar Democrat we will lose in Western PA, we will pick up 2, 3 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And you can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. The voters who are most out there figuring out what to do are not the blue-collar Democrats. They are the college-educated Republicans who lean Republican or are independent and in the suburbs.
Context for listeners, this all came about because you expressed some frustration about criticism of the DNC coming from our direction. So I appreciate you coming on to talk about it directly. I'll just say up front, we share the goal of making sure Democrats win everywhere, especially the White House in 2028. I also very much understand you've got one of the hardest jobs in politics that you took at an especially tough time for the party. But I do want to press you on some specific things because I think the stakes are too high not to. Does that sound fair?
Sounds great, John. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I want to start with the 2024 autopsy, which you call an after-action review. When you won the chairmanship in February of 25, you criticized the DNC's refusal to release their 2016 autopsy as exactly what not to do. You said, quote, was there any utility in doing that? And then promised your 2024 autopsy would be different. Your exact quote was, of course it will be released. Why did you change your mind on that?
Well, look, I mean, what I said all along, even when I ran for this position, is that we were going to focus on the things that will help us win the upcoming election, right? Making sure that we learn the right lessons that could help inform our victories. And that's what we've done. We said this when we sent out the press release back in November saying we weren't going to release the report. We were going to actually keep our focus on those lessons, and we released those lessons. We continue to do that. And it's important for me, instead of navel gazing and looking backwards and trying to relitigate 2024, I don't know about you, John, but I don't have a time machine. I don't think you do. No one does, so we can't change what happened in 24. The only thing we can do is actually change what happens in the future, including the 26 election cycle, 28 and beyond. That means we do need to learn the lessons.
But on this show in August, you told me this about releasing the review, quote, "We have to do it to give people who invested so much time, energy, and money a sense of what happened and why we lost."
Correct.
Especially why we lost. So what changed between August and December? I understand there are lessons, but those are not the full report. Why not release the full report? What's in the report that you wouldn't want
well, first off,
to publicize?
There's no smoking gun in the report. And I know that's what everyone's so eager to learn. I mean, the smoking gun. Guess what, John?
But if there's no smoking gun, why wouldn't you just release it then?
Because we want to keep the focus on the lessons. Because what ends up happening here is that people, of course, want to weaponize the report in a way to look backwards, to point fingers, place blame in a way that actually doesn't keep us focused on the upcoming election. But instead, the navel gazing of focusing backwards actually takes us backwards. We're 189 days from this election, John. What we don't need to be focused on is actually relitigating 2024. What we need to do is learn the lessons of 24 and the years preceding that can help us win this.
It was never going to work and was always going to become fascism. I'm Louisa. I wrote my PhD on the rise of the far right in contemporary politics. But a recent poll has suggested that 57% of people believe that the cost of living crisis is never going to end. When people can't see a future, they return to a vision of the past. But it's not a real past, it's a mythic past. It's exclusive, not inclusive. We're seeing Make America Great Again, take back our borders, because it's about a stable past. But you've always got to ask, whose past? A pre-civil rights past? A pre-women's rights past? Nostalgia is not history. It's not remembering. It's forgetting. Because if you look at the history of working class people and when they have had the most prosperity and the most stability, this is when we've had a more socialist state. We've had a stronger welfare system. We've had investment into national health services, into housing, higher education. And I'm not saying we should go back to the past to bring back Keynesian economics, which is what the system was called post-war. But we should be looking at history in a way that allows us to learn from it, not seeing it as a utopia to return to, because that can never happen. This new technological age will bring new challenges. It has brought new challenges. We need new systems and new economic structures to combat those issues that we're going to face. But what the far right do is construct a fantasy to retreat to in moments of instability. They feed off disenchantment, of rage, of feeling powerless. And they do this by using the language of revenge, of taking something back, creating an other, of a scapegoat. And look, they're right on the bit about loss. We have lost a lot. We've lost our communities. We've lost our economic stability. We've lost a right to social housing. But rather than presenting new ideas or getting people to think critically or bringing people into dialogue about imagining a different kind of future, they provide an easy answer and an easy scapegoat who they dehumanize. People feel powerless because power has moved from politics to finance. And when you don't have any finance and you don't have any capital, then this creates so much internalized shame and outward rage. The only way we combat this is through community, through dialogue, through communication, through learning. We need to be having compassionate, honest conversations about what it is we've lost and how we can reimagine and re-envision what we mean by home and stability. We need an economy based off of care, not profit. Remember, we can't have a democracy without informed citizens, and it's an emergency.
Before 1933, Berlin had thriving gay communities and networks. Things changed when the Nazis came to power and shut down gay bars and magazines. Then the Nazis started arresting more men for having sex with other men. Sometimes they imprisoned gay men in concentration camps. In the camps, their uniforms included a pink triangle patch, indicating their alleged crime. This marked the men as targets for horrible physical and sexual abuse by guards and prisoners alike. About 5,000 to 15,000 men were sent to concentration camps as pink triangle prisoners. This is only a small percentage of the men arrested by the Nazis for allegedly having same-sex relations. They faced hate and discrimination, but their memory lives on. Let's honor and remember them with pride.
2021 is already a record year for states aiming to restrict transgender rights. The latest was last week's ban in Florida on transgender athletes playing on female school sports teams. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano spoke with Chase Strangio, Deputy Director for Transgender Justice for the ACLU LGBT and HIV Project, about this record-setting year in state legislation aimed at the transgender community.
Chase, please describe Florida's so-called Fairness in Women's Sports Act and explain why it has sparked so much outrage among civil rights activists.
Yeah, so of course, on the first day of Pride, Republican Governor DeSantis signs this anti-trans bill. What it is a ban on trans women and girls participating in women's and girls sports. Unfortunately, it is similar to 7 other bills that have been signed into law just in 2021, and analogous to Idaho's ban on trans women and girls participating in sports that was signed into law in 2020. So we're now seeing this widespread movement to ban women and girls who are trans from women's sports. I think what happened in Florida, which is not totally anomalous in terms of what's going on elsewhere, is that you have this bill, which is falsely pitched as, defending or protecting women. What it does is ban a subset of women and girls from sports, trans women and girls, and in the process, it allows the state to police the bodies of all women and girl athletes. It sort of turns over this policing authority, because essentially what it's saying is that some women and girls aren't legitimately women and girls, and the state and others are empowered to challenge people's sex.
Chase, as you know, more than 250 bills aimed at the LGBTQ community have been introduced in state legislatures this year, according to the Human Rights Campaign. Why 2021, and how does Florida's new law fit into that picture?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons that we're seeing this escalation of attacks on the LGBTQ community, and particularly on the trans community. It's part of a continued backlash from marriage equality. So when the Supreme Court struck down bans on marriage for same-sex couples in 2015, you immediately saw a backlash in the form of legislative attacks on trans people and trans youth in particular. There was a little bit of a lull in state legislatures during the 4 years of the Trump administration, where I think you saw less urgency from, far right state governments, because they knew that they had the federal government on their side to be the main discriminator against LGBTQ people. Then what we see in 2020 is sort of this perfect storm, where you have the election of Joe Biden and a backlash to that. You also have in June of 2020, the Supreme Court issuing a landmark opinion, making clear that LGBTQ people are covered under existing civil rights statutes. So that's another area where you have this incredibly important Supreme Court decision, much like the marriage equality decision, that it also leads to backlash.
We've heard more about legislation aimed at blocking transgender youth from playing on sports teams consistent with their gender identity, or aimed at blocking them from receiving gender-affirming medical care. But what other bills and laws are on your radar?
There were, in Montana, a bill that banned updates to birth certificates to align with people's gender. That was passed and signed into law by Governor Gianforte. Tennessee passed a series of anti-trans bills, one of which would require businesses that allow trans people to use the restroom to post signage to signal to customers that trans people might be using a restroom, as well as other restrictions on trans people accessing restrooms consistent with their gender identity in schools. And then we also saw a lot of bills that would expand the ability of individuals, of businesses to, to turn people away from services, including medical services, if they had any moral or religious objection. Arkansas, for example, passed an incredibly broad medical conscience bill that was very much designed to target trans people, that would allow medical providers to turn away a trans patient just based on any, simple rejection of transness. And that's not just related to gender affirming care. That would be turning people away for any reason.
And obviously, this is the beginning of Pride Month, and we're seeing a lot of companies and corporations celebrating Pride and including Pride flags in their marketing campaigns. And some corporations have even issued statements opposing anti-LGBTQ state legislation. Is that enough, in your opinion?
No, it's not enough. I mean, I think it's incredibly difficult to stomach the Pride, merchandising this year, because what we know is that corporations have an incredible amount of power when it comes to pushing back against state legislation. I think, by and large, we had corporations being incredibly recalcitrant. And though in the past we've seen some corporate engagement around defending LGBTQ people from these types of state legislative attacks, when it came to the types of truly terrifying attacks on trans youth that we saw this year, there was almost no action from the corporate sector. And what we did see was incredibly minimal engagement, sort of sign-ons to just a general letter, instead of having companies engage, particularly where you had companies either headquartered in certain states or doing a lot of business in certain states. We did not see the level of engagement needed. And so when it comes time for Pride Month, I think we all have to be particularly discerning, because it's very clear that companies are willing to leverage our likeness, leverage our magic, but then not show up when it comes time to making sure that states don't take away our material opportunities for survival. And that's really what we're contending with right now.
Chase Strangio, Director of Transgender Justice at the ACLU LGBT and HIV Project. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Vote on Tuesday?
I didn't vote.
And why did you not vote?
Because I don't believe in the system anymore.
And did you get a chance to vote on Tuesday?
Yes!
And who did you vote for?
Trump!
The $1 million question. Trump.
Trump.
Donald Trump. Well, actually, early voted. I voted for Trump.
Honestly, I didn't vote.
She voted for Trump.
I voted for Trump.
I voted for Trump.
Me too.
Before I voted Democrat. At this moment, I voted Donald Trump.
Hillside Avenue in Queens and Fordham Road in the Bronx are two areas that saw the biggest shift towards Trump in last week's election. Even more residents didn't vote at all.
They like Trump because they don't want the Palestinian, the brothers they killed. The war in Ukraine, the Democrats giving all the money and the war. This is no good.
The swing is because people want lower prices. They probably believe that Trump will give them that.
Market price all around.
Energy, gas.
La comida.
Food. Most of these people are working families. They're working 1 to 2, 3 jobs, and rent is expensive. Foods are going up, utility bills are up.
And that's your hope, to see a little bit more of an affordable life?
Absolutely. What Trump did in the first 4 years, Fordham Road saw something where Kamala couldn't do that.
There were young voters who didn't vote for her because of the genocide, and I wouldn't have voted for her if I did, but I did vote for her, obviously, because I have common sense.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you didn't vote?
Since you're out here, Gaza, who should I vote? Either side will go ahead, send bombs from here to kill my brothers and sisters.
Palestine issue, and then other issue is like Russia and then Ukraine. He stopped that war. That's why I voted him.
You can't say you're a Democrat and stand for the genocide that's going on in Gaza, period.
Practically, I like Democrat. I like Democrat, but I don't like this. In Gaza, a lot of people have died.
Have you voted for Democrats in the past?
I have.
And what would it take for you to vote for a Democrat in the future?
Being able to pay attention to the regular Americans and their economic needs.
They should make economics the forefront of their campaign.
People were not really feeling it in their pockets.
I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I voted against Trump also in the 2018 midterms. Insulting us, playing on our emotions. All they do is shame you, and they just want to use glitzy campaigns, and they get celebrities. And
if you're speaking the things that people want to hear about, I don't care what color you are, I'll vote for you.
we have a mayor's race coming up next year, and if there was a candidate talking about freezing the rent, making buses free, making universal childcare a reality, are those things that you'd support?
Absolutely. He'd have my vote all day.
We need childcare that is affordable. Buses should be free. The hike in the Metro cards is like totally unaffordable.
My name is Zoran Mamdani. I'm going to be running for mayor next year.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Wow. And I'm going to be running on that platform. Thank you.
I'm going to vote for you. Your energy is...
Thank you. My energy's getting up to inflation.
Her work stands on its own, and turns out she had a piece for Wired magazine, a deep dive into a dark money group that is secretly funding high-profile Democratic influencers. And I obviously have a lot of additional information to offer as someone who is a progressive content creator, a socialist influencer, if you want to call it that, who has been approached in the past as well. So I can give you guys a little bit more details on this kind of thing too, on top of what she wrote. And there's obviously a bunch of stuff that she was not able to add in to this piece because, it would have been far too expansive. But here it is. A dark money group is secretly funding high-profile Democratic influencers. An initiative aimed at boosting Democrats' online offers influencers up to $8,000 a month to push the party line. All they have to do is keep it a secret and agree to restrictions on their content. In a private group chat in June, dozens of Democratic political influencers discussed whether to take advantage of an enticing opportunity. They were being offered $8,000 per month to take part in a secretive program aimed at bolstering Democratic messaging on the internet. Wait, what? $8,000 a month honestly seems like a small payout if they actually supposed to be high-profile influencers. The economy really is falling apart. Are you kidding me? $8,000 a month is an incredible amount of money for whatever their deliverables are. What the fuck? Do you have $8,000 a month that you have to spare? We're talking about like up and comers. You know what I mean? We're talking about people like $8,000 a month is life-changing money for a lot of people, for virtually everyone. You're talking about almost $100,000 a year. That's an incredible amount of additional revenue that you're going to be able to generate. $8,000 a month would change every single person in this chat's life, no matter how high profile the people are. Unless there's someone like myself, and there's not a lot of other people at my level. $8,000 a month is unironically going to be a life-changing amount of money for most people. And this is not like me flexing. You have to understand. Like someone like David Pakman I'm using him because he's like a big content creator, right? Like he would be a high-profile influencer. I'm not making any inferences here. I don't know if he was a part of this or not. I'm just using him as an example because of like his size. Or Kyle Kalinske, for example, right? Kyle Kalinske is an even better example because he most likely didn't participate in this program, obviously. So I'll just use him instead. For someone like Kyle Kalinske, $8,000 in additional revenue a month would be massive. He is one of the most high-profile political influencers out there. Even Majority Report. He's in the article. Yes, he took the money. Not Kyle. Oh, he is in the article. And he did take the money. Oh, he was a part of the program. Okay, well, all right. Well, then I don't feel that bad first saying David Pakman. Anyway, but the contract sent them to Chorus, the nonprofit arm of liberal influencer marketing platform, came with some strings. Among other issues, it mandated extensive secrecy about disclosing their payments and have restrictions on what sort of political content the creators could produce. In their group chat, influencers debated the details. Should we send a joint email with all our email addresses, or are we just going to send things separately and hope they change everything for everyone? Lorenzo, a non-binary creator in Columbus, Ohio, with over 884,000 TikTok followers, asked the group. Some joked about collective bargaining. Any Newsies fans in here? Eliza Orland, a public defender and reality TV star known for appearance on Survivor, posted in the group. We're a union just by saying so. The influencers in the chat collectively had at least 13 million followers across social media platforms. They represented some of the most well-known voices in online posting in support of Democrats, and they are key to wherever the party moves next. But ultimately, the group didn't make much progress. Reading through the revised Chorus contract, like you win some, you lose some. A reproductive justice influencer named Perry, who posts under the handle Women in America, responded later in the thread. I also think there's at least 4 other things that should change, but the vibe I got from their email was that there would be minimal, if any, changes. Lorenzo Orleans and Perry did not reply to request for comment. I don't feel strongly about pushing, to be honest. Aaron Parnas, a Gen Z. Oh my God, Lev Parnas' son Aaron Parnas was a part of this. A Gen Z news influencer who has been called the Gen Z Walter Cronkite and has been lauded in legacy media outlets, posted in the chat. They aren't going to modify it anymore. Seems like a take it or leave it. Parnas declined to comment. I believe we're in stage 5, acceptance, Perry responded. Creators began signing on to the deal. For years, Democrats have struggled to work with influencers. In 2024, President Joe Biden's White House snubbed several prominent content creators after they lightly criticized the administration over its policies on climate change, COVID, Gaza, and the TikTok ban. Content creators who challenged Kamala Harris, including Hassan Piker, a well-known influencer on the left, were similarly unwelcome at campaign events. After the Democrats lost in November, they faced the reckoning. It was clear the party had failed to successfully navigate the new media landscape, while Republicans spent decades building a powerful and robust independent media infrastructure, maximizing controversy to drive attention and maintaining tight relationships with creators despite their small disagreements with Trump. The Democrats have largely relied on outdated strategies and traditional media to get their message out. Now, Democrats hope that the secretive Chorus Creator Incubator Program, funded by powerful liberal dark money group called the 1630 Fund, might tip the scales. The program kicked off last month, and creators involved were told by Chorus that over 90 influencers were set to take part. Creators told Wired that the contract stipulated they'd be kicked out and essentially cut off financially if they even so much as acknowledged that they were a part of the program. Some creators also raised concerns about a slew of restrictive clauses in the contract. This is so fucking insane, bro. What are we doing? What are the creators doing? What are the fucking liberals doing? What's wrong with you? Why the fuck? Dude, first of all, this is the type of shit we yell at Tim Pool over because they're getting it from fucking Russia, okay? This is the type of shit we yell at Ben Shapiro over because they're getting money from the same exact funding groups that fund the Republican Party, like the Wilkes brothers and shit. How the fuck are these guys just like running around being like, the Democrats are awesome, liberals are great, Gavin Newsom is hot, I want him to blow my back walls out, I think he's the next president, and then you fucking turn around and you're getting a fat bag from the Democratic Party through shadow donations that you're not even disclosing? What the fuck? Unimaginably unprincipled. Shit, man.
Its propaganda machine is still going full force. Israel has rolled out a massive PR campaign in the US to influence public opinion on its genocidal war in Gaza. It includes targeting social media narratives and AI platforms. This is how much it's costing to run. Documents filed with the US Department of Justice show that Israel's foreign ministry has launched Project 545 in October 2025. The 545 refers to what it costs in shekels, the equivalent of $145 million. The documents show that Israel hired US-based firm Clock Tower to, quote, combat anti-Semitism. That mission includes creating online material and websites that could shape the data used to train artificial intelligence models, such as ChatGPT, Grok, and Gemini. Another contract worth around $750,000 was signed to develop a bot-based program. It floods social media with pro-Israeli messages. Israel is also recruiting more social media influencers.
We have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged, and the most important ones are the social media. How do we fight back? Our influencers.
The campaign is worth $1 million, with influencers paid $7,000 per post to promote a positive image of Israel in the US. Israeli media also says the foreign ministry is planning to spend $4 million on marketing aimed at Christians in the US. One way they're doing this is by portraying Palestinians not only as allies of Hamas, but enemies of Christianity. The plan lists celebrities they want to bring on board, like actor Chris Pratt and basketball player Stephen Curry. This campaign is organized by Hasbara, Israel's public diplomacy agency. In 2025, Hasbara's budget increased by 20 times to almost $150 million. Included in this budget is the $50 million deal Israel made in June with Google, X, and other platforms to run ads denying evidence of famine in Gaza. But in August, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, which partners with the UN, clearly and unequivocally confirmed famine was underway in Gaza. In October, a poll revealed that 6 in 10 Americans viewed Israel unfavorably as a result of its war in Gaza. That suggests Israel will have to continue spending millions of dollars if it hopes to sway public opinion, and in the process, maintain its military funding from Washington.
This country, Ukraine.
Hey, yo! What? Yeah! This is awesome. Oh my God. Okay, by the way, $100,000, you would be screaming like that too. $100,000 a week? Don't even. $100,000 a week, you'd be screaming. You'd be like, I hate Ukraine, sell Disney's a homosexual man. Oh my God, bro. $100,000 a week, bro. That's crazy. Who came out with a statement about being pro-Russian propagandist, a paid pro-Russian propagandist? Yeah, it's not just Tim Pool, it's people with Tenet Media. This indictment alleges that right-wing commentators like Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, and Lawrence Southern, as a part of the Tenet Media YouTube channel, have been unwittingly working for a Russian influence operation. 2 people described in the Tenet indictment as unnamed founders were very aware that their operation was funded by Russians. Tennessee Business Records lists Tenet's founders as Blaze TV's host and TPUSA contributor Lauren Chen, aka Roaming Millennial, and her husband. Now let me tell you something, okay? I have not tried to any of these people in this indictment, but the #1 defender of Ukraine, who kept saying I was a Russian dissident or a Russian operative, has. You couldn't have asked them why they were doing pro-Russian propaganda and how much money they were getting paid when you were trying to Lawrence Southern, or when you were trying to Roman Millennial, when you were doing buddy conversations with these people, Destiny? What happened? This is also, it doesn't matter. Vindication or not, it doesn't matter because the people that are so invested in me being a Russian op, like a Russian operative, not a Russian opposition, are so invested in that they will never listen to reason. They've already made up their minds. They've watched all the YouTube commentary videos from these dumbasses who kept saying like I was pro-Russia, pro-Russia, pro-Russia from the jump. They will still continue with the investment that they've made. But I just want to point out, seems like who are pro-Russia got. Seems like who are paid propagandists got. A new DOJ indictment that it alleges that RT employees covertly funded and directed by a U.S. company with $10 million in order to push pro-Russia content. The company's based in Tennessee. There is one media company based in Tennessee with the same phrase listed in the indictment. The Canadian entity that owns Tenet Media, of course, is owned by Lauren Yu Sum Tam, also known as Roaming Millennial, Liam Donovan, on the board of directors. Or was it Roaming Millennial? Is that what her name was? Am I saying that right? What the was her name? Lauren Chen. You know, people that Destiny is definitely cozied up to over the last couple of years. It remains to be the truth that Canada is not sending their best. They're either sending their worst or they're sending their best in some instances. But like usually in the realm of politics, Canada is sending their absolute worst. The indictment
escalating once again with Nick Fuentes attacking Ben Shapiro in the Daily Wire after they announced massive layoffs at the company. You see, one thing that's happening is guys like Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, as they run away from Donald Trump, are seeing their numbers go up. And those who have decided to stick with Donald Trump, like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and the Daily Wire, are seeing their numbers drop dramatically. Let's dive into this story because it is breaking apart the right wing's massive communication ecosystem that they built, a disinformation machine that has been plaguing the Democratic Party for years, might just be falling apart onto itself. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Be sure to engage.
Because Elon Musk, who we all know was a major Trump funder, has turned Twitter into a MAGA propaganda hellscape, and it wasn't even that fun to begin with. I'm not interested in participating. And while Elon's overt manipulation on Twitter is pretty horrifying to watch, it's only the latest in a very long timeline of billionaires buying media companies in order to control the narrative. And Trump's latest win shows definitively the propaganda works. The conservative media ecosystem with Fox News at its epicenter has created a sealed feedback loop, and it's responsible for brainwashing your least favorite cousins, who you'll likely have the pleasure of seeing across the Thanksgiving table very soon. It might be impressive if it weren't so disturbing. I wanted to find out how right-wing media grew into the multi-billion-dollar fact-resistant propaganda machine we see today. Who put up the funding to build this vast ecosystem in the first place? This is who's funding the right-wing media. Let's get into it. Up, honey, a new project from the Heritage Foundation just dropped. And by just dropped, I mean it's actually been public since October 7th, 2024. But the mainstream media has just picked up on it, in part because a lot of the information about its creation has largely been kept under lock and key by the Heritage Foundation, and also because we have watched the strategy laid out by Project Esther unfold before our eyes in the first 4 months of the Trump administration. So we now know that they weren't fucking around. Project Esther is the Heritage Foundation's answer to increasing anti-Semitism in the wake of the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks in Israel. It claims that there is a, quote, highly organized global Hamas support network, or HSN, supported through numerous Hamas support organizations, or HSOs, such as Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace, that must be pulled out by the root in order to ensure not only the safety of Jews in the US, but more importantly, the very soul of America. With all
genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has very genes.
An American Eagle ad with overtly racist undertones tells us that Sydney Sweeney's genes are great because they're blue like her eyes. Meanwhile, a modern-day Holocaust happens on the other side of the globe, with images of emaciated babies delivered direct to our phones while our president sets 500 tons of emergency food aid on fire. And Trump signs an executive order making it legal to forcibly institutionalize, detain, imprison, intern, choose your verb, anyone the regime determines is mentally ill. I made an episode a year year ago about how the right in America has rebranded eugenics to make it all part of the Make America Great Again plan, warning that Trump 2.0 would systematize, under Project 2025, its approach to eugenics. Back then, we were mostly hearing dog whistles. Today, it is openly embraced. We're going to connect the dots between these headlines today and take a dive into how our eugenicist past has shaped the present moment, from Sydney Sweeney to the genocide in Gaza to the targeting of mentally ill Americans. First, Elijah Miller, let's get started. To understand the widespread chaos so far in the Trump administration, you need to know about the names, faces, and ideologies of the people behind the scenes pulling the strings. So today, I'm going to try to untangle the dark web of ideologies driving this administration that go way beyond the top-level analysis. It's one thing to look at Doge as a means to save money while handing billionaires some tax cuts, or at Project 2025 as a backlash to progressive ideals, but there is a deeper ideology animating some of the actors that are pulling the strings behind Trump and see him as a convenient CEO figurehead to push through their biggest ideological initiatives. And understanding the underlying theories and beliefs makes everything that's happening much clearer and can help paint a picture for the direction we're headed. Now, before we dive in, let me please preface this by saying that I am in no way insinuating that there's some giant underground cabal of anyone making master plans to take over the United States and then the world. I think there is scheming happening for sure. I mean, Project 2025 was a major undertaking that brought together literally hundreds of people and organizations, but I'm not here to sow giant underground conspiracy theories. I think what's going on is the result of a lot of disparate actors who happened to know each other and to be influenced by the fringe thoughts of a few guys with blogs, and they now have the ear of the president and the power to experiment with those ideas. Okay, first, let's break down the theories and the people we're talking about to get a lay of the land. These people and theories have been reported on variously over the last few years, but I still think it's not well enough known. I learned a lot in diving into the research for this episode, so hopefully you will too. Elon Musk is absolutely tied up in the ideologies underpinning the second Trump administration, and in a bit of a foreshadowing of what we're going to talk about today, I saw this headline from the publication Futurism that says Elon Musk's credibility sinking as he's caught in web of lies. And it's helpful to see in the Ground News browser extension that this publication leans left. So to get a fuller picture of the story, I can click on full coverage. On the Ground News website, I can see that 181 sources are covering this topic. As with these ideas we're talking about today and Elon Musk himself, coverage of these types of stories is going to vary wildly depending on the bias of the publication you're reading. Noon on Wednesday, January 6, 2021, then-President Donald Trump took the stage at the so-called Save America march and rally in Washington, D.C., near the White House. He declared, "We will never give up. We will never concede." Soon, as crowds began to gather outside the U.S. Capitol building, a group of spectators at the Trump speech started marching to the Capitol, chanting and waving flags. At 1 p.m., the group of protesters outside the Capitol building stormed the outer police barrier. At 1:05, inside the Capitol building, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi bangs the gavel to call the joint session of Congress to order. Their task that day? Certify the election results and confirm Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. Inside the House chambers, Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas rise to object to the counting of their electoral ballots. The House and Senate split to deliberate in separate parts of the Capitol building. At 1:30 p.m., on the steps at the back of the Capitol building, protesters overcome Capitol police officers and the mob breaks through the final police barricades. Inside the Capitol, lawmakers are unaware of the mayhem outside. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell takes the Senate floor saying, "Voters, the courts, and the states have all spoken. If we overrule them, it would damage our republic forever." Around this same time, suspicious packages are found at the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters elsewhere in D.C., and nearby buildings are evacuated. The packages are later confirmed to be pipe bombs. Shortly after 2 p.m., the mob breaches the Capitol building, breaking into windows and climbing into open doors for others to follow. The Secret Service enter the chambers and remove Pence and Pelosi from the floor of the Senate and House. The Senate and House are called to recess and the building goes into lockdown. Trump tweets, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution." Representatives on the House floor are instructed to put on the gas masks kept under their seats. Shortly before 3 p.m., rioters breach the Senate chamber, jumping from the balcony to the floor below, climbing onto the podium, rifling through papers, and taking selfies and pictures that would later be used to indict them. At 3:11 p.m., a group of rioters overwhelm Capitol police officers in front of the Speaker's lobby, where lawmakers are sheltered, breaking windows and trying to force their way in. A Capitol police officer shoots Ashley Babbitt as she tries to force her way through the doors, fatally wounding her. At 3:36 p.m., more than 2 hours after protesters breached the Capitol grounds, Trump orders the National Guard to the Capitol. At 4:17 p.m., Trump tweets a video to his millions of Twitter followers saying, "I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You've seen the way others are treated. I know how you feel." He tweets again at 6:01 p.m. "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." The January 6th insurrection on the U.S. Capitol building was unprecedented in the history of this country, spurred on by a power-hungry, lame duck president who used his own platforms as well as his connections to right-wing media and conspiracy theorists to whip his base into a frenzy, largely through spreading the categorically false narrative that the election had been stolen, and he, President Trump, was the rightful president-elect, and that allowing Joe Biden to be sworn in would lead to the mass curbs on the rights and privileges that his base held so dear. Despite the fact that every major news outlet confirmed that Joe Biden was the rightful winner of the 2020 presidential election, including Fox News eventually after the threat of litigation, and regularly debunked the disinformation spreading about fraud and a stolen election, hundreds of thousands of people in the United States have been convinced that the election was stolen. Hundreds of them believed it so fervently that it was worth risking their lives and for many their freedom over. How did we get here? What is it about America or American conservatives that makes this country so susceptible to believing in fake news and disinformation? Is it just conservatives who fall for this? Is it just America that suffers from a large swath of its population believing in conspiracies that have been widely debunked? And is there a way out? I set out to find the answer to these questions, and what I found might surprise you. This is why Americans fall for fake news. Roll the intro. I'm super excited about my partner for today's video, Trade Coffee. I love coffee. Trade.
And to your point, basically they're like, yeah, mass death is happening, but that's good because these people are subhuman and they're evil and they don't count as people, right? Then you have the crisis actor Pallywood conspiracies of like they're faking all of it. Like there's like a high level, production studio in Gaza that's like making up all the, the babies being killed and innocent people being killed and people being starved to death.
It's like the free press,
Right,
starvation,
yes.
denial.
But then from there on, Adam, from 3 to 7, break down the rest of that for everybody because this is it's such a complex and technical analysis that you did here, and it just rang so true to me that this is exactly what we witnessed from so-called liberal media, basically laundering this genocide.
Yeah. So what's important to understand is that the goal of how they sold a genocide was very much about buying time. People will say, well, did the propaganda really work since Israel's approval rating, especially with Democrats, is in the toilet? And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Beyond the first few weeks, nobody really even tried to defend the genocide on principle. It got so indefensible and so grotesque that they more or less kind of moved on in terms of like, oh, this is a justified war on Hamas. I mean, again, you had the kind of zombie version where people ran through the motions. But overall, like liberal establishment and liberal media really pivoted to in February, taking cues from the White House in February of 2024, moved to the we actually do support a ceasefire, and then let's change the definition of ceasefire to Hamas surrender. And so this is where these modes of rationalization come in, which are really about buying time, about deflection, about non sequitur. And I think that, hold on one second, I want to make sure I get the, I just more or less, I remember what it is. That you had the first mode of rationalization, and by mode I mean there's the central force that we have to maintain arms sales and military support for Israel. And then there's these various modes that kind of keep liberal and progressive outrage from reaching the center of power to undo this horrific and unjustified policy. And the first mode, and I would say the most powerful and most influential in my opinion, was this idea of human shields. This idea that okay, we've got to a point now in the center left where you can't deny the horrific images. Obviously, people have TikTok, Twitter. People can see shredded toddlers and dead kids and starving kids and moms crying and this unimaginable horror. So then it's time to go to the whiteboard and start inventing sophistic reasons why this is actually something that must continue. And the first one was, yes, the suffering is horrible, but it's actually Hamas's fault. And indeed, is part of a nihilistic strategy of human shielding. And we heard this a lot, right? Jake Tapper was this was, in fact,
From your perspective, what do you think the reason is that the Donald Trump administration has chosen
not just Minnesota, but Minneapolis in particular, as sort of the epicenter for the largest deployment of these federal agents, I think we heard the Attorney General of your state say it earlier, really in the history of the country. What drew this massive deployment, as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a historical element to it. This is the only state that didn't vote for Ronald Reagan throughout the 1980, 1984 elections, in those landslide elections, particularly in 84. So there's a historical element to the state of Minnesota. I think, especially with George Floyd 6 years ago now, Minnesota, specifically the Twin Cities, have gained this reputation of being a politically active city, a particularly left-leaning city. So I think in terms of a politics that are quite, in many ways, driven by identity, the fact that Minnesota stands as sort of a barometer of leftism certainly places a target. And then if the way I see it is it's a sort of a result of a right-wing media campaign that's been targeted at the city of Minneapolis, with Nick Shirley coming in a few weeks ago, specifically being funded by the Minnesota Republican Party. I think that certainly plays a part. I think there's a direct impact of what that placed into the city. And then even Jake Lang, another right-wing provocateur coming in here last week, I think says a lot of things. And then, of course, to your point, there's a huge Somali population. I think, if I'm correct, it's one of the largest Somali populations outside of the Middle East in the world. So there's a racial element, there's a historical element, there's certainly a politicized element. And when all those things come together, it's a potent spot for a vitriol to be targeted at a city, specifically in a time where political unrest seems to be the future, seems to be a crisis that we're going to have to be living with for quite some time.
A new plan to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses after what they call an alarming uptick in incidents since the beginning of the Israel and Hamas war. Essentially, the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security are going to be partnering with campus law enforcement to track any hate-related threats and to provide some federal resources. So some of what they will be assessing could be any credible threat that is made and flagged online. Across the U.S., anti-Semitic incidents have risen nearly 400% since the Hamas attacks in Israel.
The escalation of these massive campus demonstrations in solidarity with Palestine, with the people of Gaza, demanding that their universities divest from weapons manufacturers, from contracts with the government of Israel, and more. Colombia kicked this off with the encampment that was met with a massive crackdown by the administration with the NYPD. That was not enough for someone like Tom Cotton, by the way, the Republican senator, who, if you find yourself agreeing with this fascist freak as a liberal Zionist, perhaps maybe check yourself and take a look in the mirror. He has called for the National Guard to be sent on these protesters, which is meant...
He loves doing that.
He really does. But remember when he said that in 2020 about Black Lives Matter protesters, and he took out an op-ed in the New York Times and it was met with outrage? Where's the outrage here? Because, well, there's less so, because the instances of anti-Semitism that, I'm sure there are anti-Semitic incidents, but they are, by every account, extremely marginal. Extremely marginal.
We'll talk about that in the fun half.
But the headlines are dominating just those are dominated by just those marginal instances. Nothing about what they're actually asking for. That's the focus, and so you can have these like fascists like Tom Cotton saying these kinds of things, and there not be, honestly, the pushback that's necessary to meet this moment of the biggest crackdown on campus activism and free speech since the 60s. And I think Cotton calling the National Guard, invoking Kent State, was clearly deliberate, by the way.
By the way, victims of Kent State were Jewish. I think 3 of the 4.
As are victims of Columbia, NYU, and Yale's crackdown.
Disproportionately Jewish.
Disproportionately Jewish. The Jewish Voice for Peace activists, and Jewish Voice for Peace specifically targeted by the administration to cease their operations. So what was amazing, though, was as these demonstrations continue to grow, the faculty in these schools are demonstrating incredible solidarity with their students. And it goes to show that our education system it's so deeply corrupt in ways, I think that perhaps, we all understand it, but this lays it so bare.
I mean, Robert Kraft pulling his money after Shea Davidai got his pass revoked. I mean, it says everything you need to know.
It says everything you need to know, that the administration is beholden, and the administrators are beholden to these massive wealthy benefactors who get to determine the direction of these higher learning institutions. And those doing the educating and the educated are really not the priority. And so this was just honestly a really moving display. You can see here how many faculty members walked out of Columbia in solidarity with the rest of the students. Because, yeah, it's not just crazy kids, the crazy leftist kids who are anti-Semitic. It's also the teachers, the scholars, who, when you really do scholarship and you really understand the history of Palestine, the immorality of the Israeli project is incredibly clear. So, of course, academia is going to understand this. And they also understand what it means to stand with their students. This was the crowd. There, some in there, tapping down. And this was a speech here, too, from another Columbia professor addressing the student body, Christopher Brown, who's a history professor, speaking to the students about his concerns about free speech.
Good afternoon. I'm Christopher Brown, professor in the history department. This is the first time I've ever held a microphone at a protest of any kind. I'm not sure whether that's something to take pride in or not. But I say it because this is not typical for me. I'm here because I am so concerned about what has happened at DC University, with where we are now, and with where we are going. Thursday, April 18, 2024 will be remembered as a shameful day in Columbia's history. The president's decision to send riot police to pick up peaceful protesters on our campus was unprecedented, unjustified, disproportionate, divisive, and dangerous.
Talk about Fred Hampton. He was assassinated in 1969 on this date, December 5th of 1969. He was only 21 years old, which is December 4th, excuse me. That was yesterday. 1969. He was only 21 years old and already an incredibly important leader of the Black Panthers, and nationally he was which is just sort of extraordinary. In this clip, and it's very interesting to kind of go back and look at people from, some people in the 60s did a very sophisticated political analysis. And in this clip, which you're going to play, and you'll hear Bashkar, he's talking about how class politics intersects with race to sort of divide the working class, and gives this very smart fusion of racial analysis and class analysis. Let's take a listen.
What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they have black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They had them caught up in movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reaction where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on. Right on. And that's saying all power to the people. Right on. That's saying that no matter what color you are, there's only two classes. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back, because this is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fighting amongst each other. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here. You got pigs of all colors, you know that. You got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black. You even got pigs that are black and white.
Okay, Bhaskar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it's shocking his level of, and just in general, the level of political sophistication of that generation of radicals. I mean, you have someone like Fred Hampton, who was so young when he was emerging as a leader. He was 18, 19, 20, and he was murdered, like you said, when he was 21 years old. And he understood politics, and he understood how to win without compromise. You know, his politics were radical. You know, he was a Maoist. He was a black nationalist. You know, he didn't have compromised, you know, politics, but I think he represented really the best wing of the Black Panther Party, the real socialist wing, the wing that really threatened capital. And there's a reason why Cleaver, you know, ended his life as a Reaganite Republican, and you know, Fred Hampton ended his life at 21, you know, dead in his apartment, murdered by the FBI. But you know, there's that clip where he, you know, just I think says what's more or less common sense, right? There's some nuance and complications we can add to it, but you know, fundamentally at its core, working people of all races would benefit from a broad multiracial kind of class movement, and that's one of the best ways to address racism. That's something Fred Hampton understood, and that's what he expressed. Beyond that, if you listen to his clips when he's talking about some of the precursors to the Weather Underground and their actions in the days of rage and certain tactics of what he called ultra-leftist, petty bourgeois, anarchistic kind of just style of street fighting, and he told them to go organize in their communities instead.
Right.
I mean, that kind of, again, you know, add some complications, add some, you know, nuance. You know, it's a little bit more complicated than he let on, but still, you know, that's a level of sophistication you wouldn't get today. And I think it tells you why it's important that we actually have political discussions and political education. We're reading, we're talking about theory, even if it seems disconnected from our day-to-day activism. Because I think in general, the left is less grounded in history. And in general, we're dumber than we were in the past. You know, a lot of us are kind of stuck in kind of a very vague and amorphous progressivism, and we were drawn to politics for the right reason. But Hampton, I think, really shows you, you know, what you could do with when you really think seriously about these issues, and how it doesn't have to stop you from also being a credible organizer and activist. It's not an either or. You know, we need more intellectuals that actually do political work, and we need more activists that you know do intellectual work.
Yeah, no, it's really important, and I think what you're really basically saying there is Fred Hampton, great guy.
Great guy.
Great guy. Does a great. I mean, he did a great 21. Great job. It's true.
Yeah.
Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution. Right. You might run a liberator like Eric Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom fighter like Bobby Hutton, but you can't murder freedom fighting. And if you do, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain. You come up with conclusions that don't conclude. And you come up with people that you thought should be acting like pigs, that's acting like people and moving on pigs. And that's what we've got to do. So we're going to see about Bobby, regardless of what these people think we should do. Because school is not important and work is not important. Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all.
So it's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period. And just as like a thought experiment, IDW people, if we know that if somehow a population of Jewish refugees ended up in West Bank and Gaza, and an Arabic government in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv had an open air prison in what, Jewish Gaza, which they bombed with white phosphorus, they killed civilians indiscriminately, and they had no provisions for medicine. They had an embargo that blocked food, that electricity wasn't running, that there was an over 48% unemployment rate, life expectancy and malnutrition statistics were horrifying. One of the major policymakers in this hypothetical Arabic-Palestinian state said, we need to put those Jews on a diet. In the West Bank, there was another Jewish area where there was a little bit more autonomy, but there was regular Arabic settlements where they pulled up the Jewish farmers' foods, they terrorized them with rocks, the security forces broke children's bones, and they couldn't drive their own roads. We'd all have no problem understanding what that was. So there's nothing complex about it.
Can win it. That if you can explain them breaking up black people for the purposes of creating a Republican seat, that is okay. Yeah. It is okay to break black folks up. 30%, by the way, of Louisiana's community being black and not having a single seat in the United States Congress is where they want to go. That would be a black person representing the interests of 30% of the state. The courts have said, if you can give an explanation that the reason the legislature did this was to get another Republican seat, then that is okay. Well, when you consider that black folks, by and large, in the state of Louisiana, and quite frankly, all over the country, vote overwhelmingly Democratic, then they can do it all day long in broad daylight, splitting us up and creating Republican districts, because all they have to say is, well, the highest court says so we can create political districts.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani says he's been thinking a lot about scaffolding. In a new video posted on social media, Mamdani announced regulatory changes aimed at reducing the length of time that scaffolding overstays its welcome over city sidewalks. So-called sidewalk sheds are everywhere in New York, many hanging around for years, long after the construction work is done. Mamdani's video explains how these sheds unnecessarily blight the city and inconvenience people. And he lays out his proposed fixes, including size requirements for the structures, imposing new fines for sheds that are left up too long, changing the building inspection schedule. The scaffolding initiative is representative of the kind of action that has so far characterized Mamdani's first 100 days in office. Not transformative, not obviously socialist, but material and visible, improving people's lives in a small, tangible way. For instance, he's been aggressively filling potholes. The city's Department of Transportation filled 3,946 potholes in March, the most in a single month in over half a decade. Mamdani poured concrete into the 100,000th pothole of the year himself, hard hat and all. The New York Times, reviewing Mamdani's record, notes that, quote, Mr. Mamdani has hustled up a litany of quick accomplishments. He has reignited projects to improve bus speeds, built a city hall rest stop for delivery workers, opened a long-delayed new infirmary for Rikers Island detainees, secured state money to fund an incremental expansion of free preschool, and wielded the powers of his office to go after both abusive employers and bad landlords. Mamdani's actions include making it easier to cancel subscriptions, introducing a website featuring an easy-to-use map of childcare options in the city, providing millions in funding for new public bathrooms, expanding paid time off, and issuing warnings to businesses to ensure compliance, upgrading storm drains and catch basins, building new EV charging stations, and suing employers who rip off workers. The mayor's office has released a much longer list of other victories, which you can find on their website. Now, the New York Times, while conceding this litany of quick accomplishments, notes that Mamdani has made, quote, no discernible progress toward eliminating the police department's controversial strategic response group, and has reversed course on some pledges, like his previous promise to relinquish mayoral control over public schools. They also suggest that while Mamdani may be doing plenty of small, practical things that improve people's lives, he's not doing socialism. The Times writes that as New York's first modern mayor to wholly embrace democratic socialism, Mr. Mamdani has little actual power to impose that ideology on city government. They say he's prioritizing brass tacks projects over ideological ones. The narrative here is that while Mamdani may be a good mayor, he's a good mayor because he's setting aside his socialism and focusing on simply governing well. But this is wrong. Socialism's not just about bringing the means of production into state ownership, but it's also about adhering to a set of egalitarian principles that emphasize solidarity, that erode class distinctions, and build the public sector and public assets, making our country work for everyone, and not for the profits of large corporations. So fixing potholes may not be socialism, but Mamdani's aggressive effort to escalate small infrastructure fixes is part of a much broader plan to restore faith in the public sector's ability to get things done. Mamdani is fighting against decades of neoliberal ideology that told people, in Ronald Reagan's words, that the scariest words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Mamdani's trying to demonstrate that the opposite is in fact true, that when you're struggling, the exact thing you want is for a city worker to show up and help, because they're good at their jobs, they care about you, and they don't send you a fat bill afterwards. The Mamdani administration, like his campaign, deploys whimsical humor. He's had Cardi B judge a contest to come up with a jingle for his new free childcare program. He had city residents vote in a mayoral madness bracket on which infrastructure fix he should perform himself. A press conference about street safety opened with jokes about New York City's famous pizza rat. And another press conference announcing a legal settlement with the Hungry Panda delivery platform for ripping off restaurants was held in front of the Red Panda exhibit at the Prospect Park Zoo. And Mamdani said, "This hungry red panda at the Prospect Park Zoo, adorable. The Hungry Panda delivery app scamming hundreds of small businesses, not adorable." But there's actually a serious purpose behind all of this. Mamdani realized early on that stunts are actually valuable if they're done to draw attention to something that otherwise wouldn't get attention. The jingle contest is a way of publicizing a social democratic program. The Panda photo op is about getting eyes on a legal settlement against a predatory corporation. Even the fun stuff, it's very carefully engineered to make a point, and it's all part of Mamdani's overall mission to restore faith in the public sector and pave the way for the big transformative changes that he aims at long term. You can see all of this as the compromise of a radical who's run into reality. But as a socialist myself, and in fact the author of a book literally called Why You Should Be a Socialist, I personally think that Mamdani is extremely smart to focus early on delivering small things that people can see and feel. That was the approach taken by the sewer socialists in the early 20th century, who ran city administrations as mayors and tried to focus on governing well and delivering for people. It was the approach that Bernie Sanders took when he was mayor of Burlington, Vermont in the 1980s. And it resulted, for the sewer socialists and for Bernie, in popular administrations that served as living disproof of propaganda about socialist politicians bringing disaster and ruin. Mamdani needs to be given some time before we judge him on the major campaign promises about police reform, free buses, cheaper housing, etc. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. What he's doing right now is what he should be doing, which is overcoming the presumption that a young democratic socialist cannot handle the nuts and bolts of day-to-day governance. If people have much more positive experiences with city government under Mamdani, if they start to notice their potholes getting filled, their snow being shoveled, and their landlords being held accountable for violations of the law, then Mamdani will have the public support necessary to push for big things. He needs to ensure, first and foremost, that the quality of life in the city is getting better in ways that are impossible for even the New York Post to ignore. As Jacobin's Liza Featherstone writes of this blitz of conspicuous municipal competence, clean, attractive streetscapes with fewer rats and working sewers could strengthen his case for a robust, well-funded government and give him credibility as a steward of our tax dollars, including a future infusion of new public resources obtained by taxing the rich. So far, it seems to be working, and polls show
you could actually unilaterally change the world without having to constantly convince people and beg people and plead with people who are never going to agree with you through technological means. And this is where I think technology is this incredible alternative to politics.
Welcome to Behind the Curtain IMO. I'm Betsy Jordan. We continue our series on faith, tech, and the shadow grab for power with discussions about Palantir, power, and private intelligence. Today we peel back another layer of the shadow network. Peter Thiel's Palantir, private intelligence with government reach. This isn't fiction. This is the infrastructure of 21st century surveillance and warfare built in Silicon Valley, powered by ideology. Let me say that again. This is the infrastructure of 21st century surveillance and warfare, built in Silicon Valley and powered by ideology.
If you think Donald Trump is a stupid or ineffective president, I really think you need to look at this report published today by the federal government that supposedly proves 500 pages of anti-Christian bias in this country. And for people who support the agenda of the Christian nationalists, this is a big win because it proves, supposedly, that Christians are an oppressed class. In this report, they go after the Biden administration and other Democrats for supposedly putting the interests of the gay community over the interests of Christians. You need to know that the Christian nationalists have been very effective at leveraging the resources of the administrative state in order to forward their own agenda. And in so doing, they are undermining the right to the separation of church and state. For those of us who are not on board with this agenda, a lot of this might seem silly, but the fact of the matter is that this is 500 pages that is intended to lay the groundwork to further the Christian nationalist agenda in this country by legitimizing the grievances of Christians as a supposedly discriminated class. And I really encourage you to go in and try to read through some of it yourself. It is very long, but I think it's worthwhile to get a sense of what is going on here. If you think Donald Trump is a
and do what I'm told.
Look, let me bring up another Michael Brooks quote here. His philosophy: be empathetic towards humans, be ruthless to institutions. So when it comes to, the common human, people that may have fallen into the wrong hole, fallen down the wrong, YouTube hole, how many people have done that? There are people I know that don't watch political stuff, but they always get suggested, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. It's gross how many people likely fell down into conservative ideology just based on that. But don't get angry at those people. Be ruthless towards the institutions. So you win people over by being empathetic, by understanding their situation and getting to them that way. But when it comes to people in positions of power, like Schultz, like Ben Shapiro, like Jeff Bezos, you can be pissed off at them, definitely. At the very least, mock them, ensure that they are not respected in society. But at the same time, be ruthless to the institutions that allow that kind of system to continue, and be ruthless towards capitalism that has allowed that kind of wealth to be amassed while there are people that go hungry in the streets. So
just wondering, because like Trump was able to kind of co-op a lot of economic populist stuff on trade and again immigration. Obviously the way he's implemented it, no one can possibly support, but it's kind of exploded the issue on the left as well, and has kind of undermined like a Sanders traditional like economic populist or labor position to the point that he's kind of moved on from that. So I'm just kind of curious because I've heard you talk about a bit like in terms of short term, just I think you said you'd do two things. You would just grant everyone citizenship immediately and then demilitarize the border. So I guess beyond that, like what sort of policy? Because I mean, I imagine that you're not in favor of like sort of a meritocratic Canadian model or something like that, but kind of that labor position has been kind of eroded. So
I'll get to where I think you're right and where I think it's tricky in a second, but I don't. If you have the frame of the world I have, the issue is always the boss and always capital. It's not fellow workers. So even someone like my buddy Sagar Enjeti on the Hill, who's quite right wing, will say he doesn't think it will happen and it's not his path. But yes, if you implemented what Bernie said, which is a universal minimum wage for every single worker in this country, documented and not, yes, that would deal with it in a lot of ways. I hope I'm characterizing him correctly. I think I am. But he'll correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're in a situation where you can use surplus labor to drive down wages, your enemy is not the other person laboring. Your enemy is the boss that's fucking your wages. That's it. So my politics around immigration are not just moral, they're material and strategic, because what difference does it make? So maybe there's some, and because even today, even with the biggest even with this terrorist white supremacy regime of immigration, is that really helping people's wages? No. Is that really doing anything? And if you implement a quote unquote merit-based system, all you'll do is the people at the floor level are going to be fucked regardless, because the reason they're in a bad position is because of their labor value and how they're compensated in the market, and they don't have labor and governmental protections. If you do a merit-based system, all you're going to do is all of a sudden say like, hey, you thought that an upper middle class job that you thought you had? Sorry. We have people that actually come undercut you. And again, that's a boss issue, not a fellow immigrant issue. So it's actually important to properly diagnose where the problem is coming from strategically. I think that when you actually poll a vast majority of Americans, it's interesting how liberal their views on immigration actually are. They don't support open borders. They don't, and which I'll get to that stuff in a second. But the idea, and I have a friend who's a labor attorney, and it's really interesting. He's like, no, people really do think that if you're undocumented, you can just walk to a post office and fill out some forms and they'll figure it out. They actually think that. They don't understand how brutal the system is. And they certainly don't support kidnapping children, and they don't support this type of thing. And they don't support, what are the racial implications of chain migration? Stuff that's come out about Trump wanting to have immigrants shot at the border. I mean, this stuff is really obscene. And I actually really, not only I think most people don't support it, I certainly think anybody that would consider voting for any kind of Democrat is going to be the type of person that probably wouldn't support such brutality and racism. I think this, though, when it comes to the left, this is another counterculture, subculture thing. And I think it's cool if people want to say that the dream and the vision is ultimately some type of borderless world. That's probably where I'm at in my utopia. But I think going and demanding specific inflammatory rhetoric around there needs to be open borders is just, I think it's just a political disaster. It's totally unnecessary. It's validating group speak over national appeal. And it's also, ironically, to me, very problematic in a context where, in the foreign policy dimension, that indigenous people, or, talk to President Lula, fourth of what he's talking about is getting Brazilian sovereignty respected. And now there's like this first world discourse on like, no borders, man. So I don't like that. And I also think this is another thing, again, I keep trying to distinguish between habit and like social etiquette and principles. If somebody says to me, I believe in borders and therefore I want to be able to kidnap children, have people murdered, okay, we're fighting, that's it. There isn't even anything to talk about. But if somebody says, I want to feel that I live in a country that has a discernible map and some type of broad-based identity that isn't defined along racial or ethnic exclusion, I could say, hey, I have a different vision of the world, but I can't just say like, that's wrong. Both because it's not where over 90% of people are at, and also because it's actually really quite arrogant.
I have the sense, I could totally be wrong, but I think like the more kind of provincial, closed-minded, and I don't mean that pejoratively, just temperamentally closed-minded provincial people in this country, including like most of them working class, a lot of them don't want a more multicultural country. They do want something that, and in that sense, they do favor something that's kind of racially exclusionary, to use your...
Well, which part were you saying about, though? Because I think, well, first of all, I don't...
And those are the people who supported Trump, you know? And,
well, again, I don't like that use of the word working class, because the working class is overwhelmingly multiracial. Now, on the other hand, hey, sweetie, that's another mixed thing, because, like, on one hand, the working class is overwhelmingly multiracial, and no, I don't think, I'm being really specific, I do not think most Americans support having children in concentration camps.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And on the other hand, when I say, no, I actually think there is a difference. I think that, and in fact, if you look at the polls amongst African Americans and Hispanics who are citizens, they're not super liberal on immigration.
Yeah.
So there absolutely is a constituency of people who pretty definitionally in American context would not define a national identity as racially exclusive, but certainly think that they have a border and da-da-da-da-da. So I think that's a distinction I'd make.
Mission, our programs are meant to illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate, bigotry, and anti-Semitism through time, and stories of resistance against injustice. Today, we will be discussing the experiences of transgender and non-binary folks in pre-war and Nazi Germany. We have talked before about this, along with the pink triangle and gay experiences specifically, but as the rights, healthcare access, and really the very existence of trans people are being viciously curtailed at the whim of legislation in the United States and around the world, it's important to delve into this history. We're so pleased to be here with scholar Lori Marhofer, who will share perspectives, experiences, and language about a topic that each of us understands and connects to in different ways. It's tricky to talk about people in the past with contemporary language that didn't exist at the time. We talk about this often at the museum in our programs, exhibitions, and more. So we're so grateful to Lori and to all of you for navigating this with us. So now I'm going to introduce you all to our speaker. Lori is the John